Hello, so my name's Luke. I work for a B2B agency called Definition. I've been working in PR since 2008 and in SEO since about 2012. I mainly, these days, specialise in expertise, authority and trust signalling, so generating kind of top-tier brand mentions and links to influence search rankings. Now, this is a picture of a gentleman called James Buchanan, and he recently ranked 44th bottom of a list of the all-time best US presidents, which amazed me. But it was a story that was produced by a data-driven journalism agency called Stacker that I'm sure you guys have heard of. However, you might be in a situation where you don't want to compete with the likes of Stacker. You don't want to commit to kind of data-led PR campaigns, and instead, but you still need a way to generate top-tier brand mentions and links. So if you can't go down the kind of viral content campaign route, and that's a little bit too close to home, to be honest, as an image, but if you can't go down the viral content campaign route, you don't want to because you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, say, or the publications you're interested in targeting won't take syndicated content, or there's a few different reasons, but kind of what do you do in that case? The answer is good old-fashioned media relations. Basically, quite obviously, the process of building a relationship between your clients, the brands you represent, and the media. So we invest a lot of time and money at Definition into media relations. That could involve anything from putting on quizzes, journalist-only quizzes, or wining and dining them, or simply supplying them with the kind of best information as and when we get it. And because of the goodwill we build up, occasionally we get to use up a little bit of that goodwill. So we put a couple of questions to some of our top-tier contacts at a number of different publications, including these. And we asked them a couple of things. So firstly, we asked them, what reaction commentary do you want on breaking news? And secondly, and this is because I was having a bad morning at the time, we also asked them, if an organisation sends you rubbish, would you ignore their contributions in future? Now, the 33 responses we got from these organisations, or from these journalists, pretty much fell into three buckets. And I'm going to kind of take you through these three themes today. Apologies in advance, there's quite a lot of text, but we had about 3,000 words in the end that I've tried to condense down into these slides. So the first bucket, and it's from the horse's mouth, right? So journalists want timely contributions, right? Kind of goes without saying, but so this was a comment from Alex Hearn, the tech editor at The Guardian. Simple enough, really. I tend to want as much comment as possible, as quickly as possible. So we're talking half an hour to an hour, basically, of a story breaking. You need to be sending in thought leadership from your, or comment from your clients. A business correspondent at the BBC. What we don't want is people emailing us the day after the story to offer their, in inverted commas, perspective. Literally yesterday's news, but happens constantly. So this is an important point, right? If you guys, if you can't get comment over ASAP, say within the hour, then maybe don't send anything at all. You run the risk of kind of doing more harm than good in a way if you're clogging up a limited inbox with perspectives on stories that are that were yesterday's news, essentially. The same BBC journalist, however, went on to say what the savvy, bigger analyst firms will do is they will drop us a line and they will say, hi, if you're covering event X later in the week, we'll have person Y available if you need reaction, right? So this is important, right? Try and get your, don't be reactive at all, try and be proactive. Try and get your subject matter experts, your thought leaders, in front of the journalists in advance. Date planning is obviously therefore super important. marrying the subject matter experts that you've got access to, the thought leaders you've got access to, also really, really important. That's kind of going to be one of the better ways you can do the media relations piece. But the same journalist was keen to point out those big analyst firms, and this is, as he said, crucial, they only do it for big events and when they actually have an expert to offer, right? This is also kind of a key point. I'm sure you've all been in a situation where you've been presented with a client's CEO as the thought leader, and then you quickly realise that they're not the thought leader because they're the CEO. They're good at being a CEO. You have to dig a little bit deeper to get to the thought leaders. So do put the effort into figuring out who has the interesting opinion, who has the kind of new take on whatever's breaking. Marry that person to dates in the calendar and set up those events in advance. Also goes without saying, though, that it is worth having a bit of a think about who you're putting in front of the media, because those thought leaders may end up giving away chucking the baby out with the bathwater. The second kind of tranche of feedback very much fell into the inboxes acting as little black books, right? So when I got into PR all those years ago, I was under the impression, probably because of AbFab and things like that I'd grown up watching, that it was all about long boozy lunches and relationship building. Now, in reality, sadly, the long boozy lunches weren't part of the reality, but the relationship building very much was. So we had this came from a comment, this came from a gentleman called Chris Mims at the Wall Street Journal. He said, if people send me comment, I just archive it in case I need to search my inbox later for something. So this is really important. Once again, seems kind of obvious, but make sure your contributions you send through are super findable, right? Super searchable. Make sure you've got the right keywords in the subject line. You're not burying your opinion under paragraphs and paragraphs of text. Like, if you're not getting to the interesting stuff in the first couple of lines, I'd suggest you need to rewrite the email. Because even if you don't make it this time, journalists do go back through their little black books, or indeed in this case their inboxes, to find people to comment on future topics. And then this was from a journo at the Telegraph. He kind of confirmed this. If I'm working on something 3 months down the line, I wonder if anybody has emailed me about this. I wanted to use this actually as an opportunity to point out something that we've noticed occurring quite a lot recently. Over the last couple of years, and I don't know if this is pandemic induced, but we've seen top-tier journos really engage with the comment sections of their own stories. So if you don't get included, or if your thought leader isn't included, then set up a profile for them on the kind of news website of your choice and engage in the comment sections. We've noticed journalists from the FT, from the Times, engaging with the commenters on their story, which has kind of two effects, right? Firstly, it highlights the fact that that person, that thought leader in that comment section knows their stuff, but we've also seen it lead to follow-on stories as well. So if you're looking for something to do with the comment you've produced and the client signed off, then engage with the journalist in the comments. If an organisation wants to be quoted in the FT, the relevant expert should build a relationship with the relevant journalist. This also kind of goes without saying, right? But the pandemic obviously gave the whole meet and greet piece a bit of a kicking. We got to the point of definition where we were meeting journalists in parks. It got that ridiculous to try and get around the rules, the COVID rules. I think one thing that we tend to point out to clients regards relationship building and meet and greets with top-tier journos is that the meet and greet does not necessarily result in coverage, right? So it's super important you manage your clients' expectations and you explain to them that really what the journalist is looking to do is to establish your thought leader is indeed a thought leader in what you say they are. Yeah, clients do have a tendency to think that a lunch one day will result in a front page story on whatever website the day after, but that is very much not the case. And then the same journalist went on to say, all that matters to me are the thought leader's qualifications to comment on something, right? So I think one of the points here, and something we've noticed over the last couple of years, is that we're seeing, once again, an increasing trend in journalists actually, and it sounds kind of obvious, right, but Googling your thought leaders, right, the people you put forward, trying to establish whether they are indeed qualified to have an opinion on a particular story. So think about what you see in the SERP, basically, when you Google your thought leader's name. Is it a social profile? If so, is that social profile properly crawlable? Is it restricted? Does that social profile really kind of highlight your thought leader's qualifications? Because if it doesn't, it needs to. And another thing you can do that works quite well is if you're going after the top tier titles, then have a think about securing your thought leaders some coverage in maybe some trade press or some sector press. Something that we've had direct feedback from is a kind of a top tier journalist commenting that they've seen one of our thought leaders talking about subject matter X in say, whatever, Grocery Weekly or Jane's or whatever it might be. That really reassures that tier one journo that your person, your man, your woman does indeed have the right qualifications to feature in a top tier title. Even better if somebody is actually involved or affected by the story rather than just commenting. And likewise, kind of a similar point. Alternatively, someone with a direct stake in the issue or ability to speak with some authority can be enough reason to quote someone, right? This came from, this really kind of drove home the point that it's not the size of the company or what it is they're doing, it's really about the thought leader you're dealing with. So I had a small satellite tracking company as a client once upon a time. And they were all ex-military, and we had some interesting people, some former SAS and stuff. Anyway, they were able to put me in touch with a gentleman called General Sir Rupert Smith, who was the former Deputy Supreme Commander of NATO or something like that. Anyway, in the first meeting, he showed me his napalm scars and signed his book on war amongst the people versus industrial warfare. Anyway, the point being is that we were able to outmaneuver much, much bigger competitors because we had him as a thought leader, and he had the ultimate authority. So that meant brand mentions, links in top tier trade titles like Jane's, but it also meant editorial in publications like The Times, for example, because he really carried that much weight. And then the third bucket, and this is kind of obvious as well, right, but top tier journos, or any journo for that matter really, wants a different view. So this came from the FT. We don't use stuff that gets emailed round, because that would make us the same as all the other newspapers. This is a bit of a problem, right? And this kind of means that depending on the titles you're interested in generating coverage in, generating brand mentions and links in, you need to have a bit of a think about kind of your outreach tactics. And in the FT's case, you need to make sure that they are under absolutely no illusion that they've got the material exclusively. This came from James Cook, special correspondent at the Telegraph, I think. Often we'll be under pressure to find the day two angle on a story, right? Well, that's kind of obvious. I mean, you need to move the story on. That's super key. I was quite lucky. One of my first mentors when I got started in PR was a former national economics editor who said to me pretty much on day one, he said, you need to get clients to put their head above the parapet if you want them to be featured. They've got to say something of interest. They've got to move the story on. And this was very much echoed by this gentleman. This was one of my favorite ones. Yeah, we get a lot of commentary which could be filed under blooming obvious. Pithy analysis and quotes are what I'm after. Now this, for me, this is like the kind of key point from this whole deck, and that is don't send echoes, right? And echoes are a trap that a lot of companies or clients seem to fall into. And for the best will of the world, they don't mean to, but they do. So what I mean by an echo is a client will go and read a story or a news item on something. They'll read a bit of breaking news. You will then contact them and ask them for their opinion. And what they will do, without realizing it, is they will rephrase or rehash what's already been said and repeat it back to you. That echo is then a problem. And there's a few reasons that you don't want to be sending echoes, right? So firstly, if you send that echo, then the journalist will ignore it. you've done more harm than good in that instance if you're not adding anything to the conversation. Secondly, I suppose you've told, in a way you've implied to the client it's going to work because you've signed it off and you've sent it off. So that's not handy either because you've then got to explain to them why it hasn't been used. And finally, you don't want to end up being the person that sends echoes, right? Because that puts you in a pretty awkward place. And it's not just because the client that supplies echoes is going to be ignored in future, but it'll be every email that comes from you that's ignored in future because you will become the PR that sends echoes. So be advisors, not administrators. Push back on clients. Have the hard conversations up front. Make it clear that we need to say something and move the story on because echoes need to be avoided at all costs. Common reasons I don't use rapid reaction commentary, said a journalist at the Telegraph. It's too tentative, cautious, bureaucratic, equivocating, or fence-sitting, right? So he actually gave us 6 reasons that you can read in the blog that I'll show you at the end. But the first reason was no echoes, basically, and this was the second reason. So this kind of comes back to what I was saying about putting your head above the parapet and having an opinion, moving the story on, saying something of interest. And then this was a recent comment from Simon English, who's the finance editor at the Evening Standard. Flax, right, being us and Hacks being journalists in this instance, and this was with the energy crisis. The Clever Energy Flack can make a hit with the Clever Energy Hack, new takes, angles, all this means a catnip. I think what sometimes gets forgotten or missed is that, even though it may not seem it at times, journalists are genuinely human beings, right? They've got jobs, they want to be promoted, they want to impress their editors. So if you scratch their back, they can scratch yours. If you make their life easier and you become the online PR pro that sends them stuff they can use, that sends them stuff nobody else has, happy days. It means they're going to be much more receptive to you guys in future. And then finally, this was a comment from a journalist at the Wall Street Journal. I'm pretty much only interested in a legitimately novel set of facts, or something that I haven't been following closely but should be, right? So, and this is kind of emphasised at the moment with everything that's going on in the world of politics, but the only 2 professions I've ever known to change jobs and work new beats or new roles, which they have absolutely no experience of, are cabinet ministers and journalists. So you will see journalists go from defence to marine to agriculture to health to finance, right? And it's like, what? You don't know anything about that. That works brilliantly for you guys, right? Because you've always got a new opportunity to educate a new journalist. So, I'm not here promoting any particular media database, but there is one we use that comes with a lot of intelligence. And some of the intelligence they send us in email format are journalists who have moved beats within a publication. So as soon as my team sees that, as soon as our media relations team sees that, we drop them a line. We say, congratulations on your new role. By the way, these are the 3 big things in the next 6 months you should probably be aware of. And these are the 3 opinions that our guys have got on each of those 3 things. Drop us a line if you want to go for a coffee or go for a lunch and learn a little bit more. I'd say 8 times out of 10 we get a response. 5 times out of 10 we then get a meeting with that journalist. I don't know how far we then go down the line in terms of stats, in terms of eventual coverage, but it's a really good opportunity for kind of building new relationships. So in conclusion, I have about a minute left, so I will move forward through this fairly quickly. It's pretty simple, right? Now, admittedly, the questions we sent were fairly loaded. But having said that, of the 33 journalists that responded to them, 5 of them actually said thanks. Said, I was pretty frustrated. I'm generally pretty frustrated by the quality of contributions we get sent by PRs. So timeliness is important. If you can't respond within the hour, then think about engaging in other ways, like in the comments section, for example. You'd be amazed at how much interaction you get. Even better, if you can't be quickly reactive, be proactive and build the relationship before the event. Inboxes are somewhat out of control, but are still used to source experts. Don't give up, and even if you're not used this time, you could be used next time. And finally, think about the day 2 angle and try try really hard not to send echoes. So that's it from me pretty much. With all 33 responses and about 4,500 words of them can be found on this blog, along with the names of the journalists. So I'd encourage you guys to give it a read because it's very useful for your kind of day-to-day media relations. Thanks very much.